Shalom, this is Mitch Glazer, President of Chosen People Ministries. I want to say thank you on behalf of our staff for your faithfulness, for your generosity, and for taking a little bit of your precious time to just watch a video that we produce. And my main reason for communicating to you like this is because I wanted to share a few thoughts about one of my favorite Jewish holidays. And that's the holiday of Purim. It's called the Minor Festival, and we learn all about it in the book of Esther. And actually, the major duty for Jewish people on the Feast of Purim is to just read through the book of Esther. And we do what's known as a Purim spiel, or a play. And so children of all ages get dressed up as Mordecai and Haman. We do a play, and we tell the story by a play. We also eat some great foods. Of course, you know that's very important in understanding the Jewish holidays. So we eat what's called hamantashen. Hamantashen they're also called Haman's ears or Haman's hat. And they look like little triangles, and they have prune in it, they have poppy seed in it, they can have cherry or pineapple, and actually a lot of butter, and they're just really delicious. So if you can get some of the hamantashen, that'd be great. You know the main characters in this book. We have Haman, he's the wicked guy, and whenever we say his name, everybody starts shouting boo, 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 and then we have Mordecai. Mordecai is the good guy, and he is the uncle or cousin of Queen Esther, who is our heroine in the story. Then, of course, we have some supporting characters. Even the king is a supporting character, and his name in Hebrew is Achashverosh, and he was a great Persian king, and Haman was a servant of the king. And so the story begins at the palace, where King Achashverosh had a great festival, a great feast, a banquet for his co-leaders throughout Persia. And he wanted his queen Vashti to entertain them. She refuses, and so he banishes her, and he needs another queen. And so he puts out basically does a Persian beauty contest. And throughout all of the Persian territory, he has his people do various interviews, and lo and behold, this beautiful Jewish girl named Esther, or Hadassah, which means beautiful, Esther won, and she was brought to the capital, Susa, came along with her uncle or cousin, Mordecai, who was taking care of her because her parents were not alive. And so they came to the capital, and she began going through the long process of becoming a queen. And Mordecai was spending a lot of time at the gate, interacting with others. He was not part of the court. And they kept a big secret, though. And the big secret was they were Jewish. So Mordecai was very aware of this and told Esther, keep it quiet. And because if you let people know you're Jewish, you'll be in trouble. But there were a lot of Jews living in Persia. Remember, the Jews were taken from Jerusalem to Babylon, and then Persia took over Babylon. And so there were lots of Jewish people there. And they lived okay, but there was constant underlying threat to the Jewish people because they worshiped a different God, and they took off on the Sabbath, and they had a book, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, that guided them. And so there was a lot of probably underlying animosity towards the Jewish people, but nobody had a worse case of Jewish hatred, or you can even almost call it anti-Semitism, a very early form of it, as Haman. And so Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people. Mordecai got wind of the plot, but first, let me bring you back. Mordecai overheard a couple of the king's servants who were going to try and murder the king. And he went and turned them in. And this was written down in the Chronicles of the King, according to chapter 2. And the king didn't necessarily read it. He didn't really know a lot about it. But eventually, when things began heating up between Mordecai, Esther, and Haman, then the king did read about what Mordecai had done, and he decided to honor him. Haman, of course, didn't like that, and so things continued to get worse and worse and worse, and Haman really had it in for the king. Now, we all know what happened in chapter 4. In chapter 4, you have that great line. In chapter 4, God tells Esther, through Mordecai, that it is her moment, her golden moment in the sun. And so chapter 4, verse 13, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. It was now on the table that Haman was going to destroy the Jews. And Esther had learned of this plot. So don't imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have attained royalty for such a time as this. And so the right person in the right place in the right time, and we understand that God's sovereign hand put them there. The interesting thing about the book of Esther, of course, is the name of God is never mentioned. But you see God's supernatural, superintending hand active in the lives of everybody. Mordecai was in the right place at the right time to hear those folks talking about what they would do to the king. And then Esther was in the right place at the right time because she heard about Haman's plot. And now Mordecai challenges Esther to understand her role in God's plan and really her own destiny. What did God make her to do and to be? It was her opportunity to save the Jewish people. Then, of course, the plot unfolds, and eventually they make the king aware of Haman's plot. Ultimately, Haman's plot is foiled, and the Jews ended up being saved. And at the end of the book, we learn that there was a holiday initiated, and that's the Feast of Purim. That's why we celebrate it. But there's a way to look at the story of Esther that I'd like to share with you that I think is really important. And that is, we must look at the book of Esther and the story here through the lens of Genesis 12, 1 through 3, which is the Abrahamic covenant, where God said that he would create a people, give them a land, verses 1 through 3, that he would give them a relationship with himself, that he would give them a mission. And that mission was to be a blessing to the world. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. But the Gentiles were given a mandate and some responsibility. And actually, you can think of this as a covenant, but in some ways it's really a prophecy, because what God said to Abram in Genesis 12:3 has unfolded through the ages, and you see it all throughout the story here. God said, I'll bless those who bless you, bless those who bless thee, the King James. I'll curse those who curse you, and through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So if you bless the Jewish people, you get blessed. It's very simple. Unconditional covenant, no time limits to it, no circumstances to it, just a general principle for the world to pay attention to. I'll bless those who bless the Jewish people, and I'll curse those who curse the Jewish people. And then he gives an explanation. Through you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So why does God want non-Jews to help Jewish people remain safe and live and be preserved? Well, number one, because Jewish people were constantly under attack and under a real threat of extinction. And you see that among the Egyptians, you see it among the Babylonians, even among some of the Persians, and then of course later on you see it among the Romans and the Greeks, and of course later in human history you see it through the pogroms, the Crusades, and of course the Holocaust. And so God raises up unique individuals who grab hold of their sense of destiny and, particularly in relationship to the Jewish people, do something to preserve the Jewish people. And so Esther was charged with taking up this destiny of being God's woman in God's time, doing God's work to save the Jewish people. And what happened? Well, what happened is very interesting. What happened is that not only were the Jewish people saved, but there's a very interesting passage in chapter 7. And in chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, we read the following. Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs who were before the king, said, Behold, indeed the gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. And the king said, Hang him on it. And so they hanged Haman on the gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai. And the king's anger subsided. So it seems very clear that Haman really showed how the Abrahamic covenant comes to pass. And so he meant evil for the Jewish people. He cursed the Jewish people. What happened to him? He was cursed. He was actually hung on the gallows. And it's very interesting also at the end of the book, and you can read it, that the signet ring that was going to be given to Haman, that showed that this individual was the second highest authority in Persia next to the king, that went to Mordecai. And so you see this covenant working out where God was there to take care of his people by making sure that Esther won the beauty contest and that Mordecai was in the right place at the right time. And then when Haman did what he shouldn't have done and he sought the destruction of the Jewish people, he actually was the one who was destroyed in the very same way that he wanted to take Mordecai's life. And then, of course, at the end of it all, God rewards Mordecai because God has promised that to make sure that the Jewish people survive and thrive, and they are to also play a very important role in God's work. Now, if Haman had his way, what would have happened to Jesus? If the Jews, where most of the Jews lived in Persia, if the Jewish people were destroyed, what would have happened? How would Jesus have been born of a Jewish virgin? The prophecies would have been thwarted. But God is there to preserve his people and to make sure that his plan comes to pass. Well, thank you so much for taking a few moments with me, and maybe I can ask you just a quick question. And that is, what is your destiny today? What has God created you to do? Some people say you're always in the right place at the right time if you're willing to be obedient and available to God. And I think that is probably pretty true. But what is the destiny that God has prepared for you? You know, you are uniquely and wonderfully made. And I have this sense myself, leading Chosen People Ministries, that this is what God has made me to do. And it's why he created me. And as long as he has me here, then I'm going to keep doing what he called me to do. And I love every minute of it. What has God called you to do? Whatever it is, you're probably in the right place at the right time. You just may not even notice it because you've made yourself available and you're willing to be obedient to the God who made you.